Welcome back to Moonshine Performance. We got these heads set up here now for that 427, and we're going to go ahead and start assembling. Brett got one head assembled. Where'd that go? Oh, you got it over here. He's going to start cleaning it up for paint. Stu dropped off some aluminum spray paint, and like it's aluminum colored. And what we're going to do is, should we do that black too?
I think the header might block it anyway.
Oh, yeah. We're going to clean this whole thing up while he is right now, and then we're going to mask that bolt off. And the rest of it, we're going to paint, we'll obviously mask the face of the exhaust ports, and we're going to mask everything off and paint it. And he's got to get all the diesel fuel off there right now from cleaning them. And then scrub them down, paint them. And he's going to be doing that while I am working on assembling this one. So I'm going to go through and show you, I'll assemble maybe this one and this one while I talk about it. And then I'll put a time lapse up and finish the whole head. And then we'll go from there. I'm going to go ahead and start installing the exhaust valves, but first we have to check install height so we know that our spring pressure is correct. So how we're going to do that is you'll put your valve in, and then we have, in this case, rotator deleters. This is a rotator here. This is what comes stock on them, and that sets in there. And this black piece in there gets rid of that, and that looks like this. Those are hard to get out, so that looks like this. What we're going to do is go ahead and set this measuring device in here. And I'm going to go ahead and set the camera up here. So you'll set that measuring device in there, and you'll screw it all the way down. And then you're going to mock assemble this valve. So we'll set that in there, and we'll also need a retainer. So this retainer sits in there. Pull this back. And you're going to put your keepers in as if you were actually installing this whole entire deal. So there's one keeper. And two keepers. And then what we're going to do is loosen this thing back up. That way we can measure. So what we're measuring is from the top of the spring. If this spring was in there, we're measuring this height to this height when it's compressed by the retainer. And when it's sitting not compressed, I guess, because we just want it to where it's at the seat. We don't want it open. So if I measure this install height here, it's coming out to 1 inch 975 thousandths. I'll show you that right now. You want to do it until it's snug in there. It's not moving, and it can rotate a little bit. 1 inch, there's 900 right there, and 75 thousandths. So after we know that, we can take this all apart, and we can take it out, and I'm going to use this spring compressor over here to figure out how much pressure these springs are going to give us and how many shims we need to use. We have 50,000 shims. So after we get this out, we'll take this tool, this measuring tool, bring it on over here into the spring compressor, and we're going to open this thing up to 1 inch 975 thousandths. So there's 1975. So that right there, 1975. We're going to set this in here, and we're going to make sure that this thing lines up square. And when you compress it, it needs to not move and it needs to be square. And so we need to bring that down a little bit. So right there, that measuring tool doesn't compress or doesn't move in the vise, I guess. So after that said, we're going to take a spring that we would normally put in there. Another reason we had to cut those guides for these springs. There's one layer, there's a second coil in there, and here's three. This sits in here. A regular umbrella seal will not fit in here with ease. An umbrella seal is supposed to raise and then fall. And so we had to go with positive lock seals, positive stop seals, which are these. And that will just fit on the guide just like that. And then with that being said, that seal fits right inside with ease. So that's the proper way to do it. And so you set the spring up. And we'll put this in here, and then you're going to compress it, as if, yeah, so you just compress it. So right now we're at about, I'd say around 90, a little bit less maybe, 90 pounds. So we're going to go ahead and try one shim. These shims are 50 thousandths each, so that is 50 thousandths shimmed. And we'll go ahead and set that on, and put the spring back on. And that gets it right under 100, maybe 95. And so we want to see around 100 with this size cam. And streetability, you don't want too much spring pressure on the street because it's not going to be wide open all the time. If it was a race car, we'd go with a lot more spring pressure and we'd have a bigger cam. So with 250,000 springs equaling 100,000, that is right at 100 pounds. So right there, that's exactly what we want to see. So that means we can go ahead and start installing these springs and shims. So we need 100,000 worth of shims all throughout here on the exhaust. Now they will vary a little bit, but not enough to mess with this number over here. So we're gonna go ahead and install these, and I'm gonna install this one and then do a time lapse, and I'll be back. Okay, I'm gonna start installing number 8 exhaust valve into this hole. So first thing we're gonna do is take both of these shims, both being 50 thousandths each, like we measured over here on that spring compressor, and set them down in there underneath of this rotator deleter. And then you're gonna set your rotator deleter on. And you want to make sure everything's clean before you do that, so there's nothing in there, obviously. And then you're going to take your 531 positive lock seal, and you're going to set that right on the guide. You're going to make sure that that is seated. If you look down close, the top of that guide is right to the bottom of that seal there. I wonder if we turn the flash on. If you can look closer in there, you can see that the top of that guide is touching the bottom side of that seal. So that seal is all the way on there. After that, you're going to take some assembly lube, and we're going to go ahead and throw the valve in. So get around the outside of the seal here and in, and I like to let it drip down in there. And you can never have too much of this stuff. And I like to throw that, well, since that guy, the seal's already on there, let it drip down in there a second, and then you can go ahead and throw your valve, throw your valve through. And before I poke that through, I have my retainer ready, my spring ready, my keepers ready, because I don't want all that stuff to goop off, because that's going to help hold on our retainers later. So I'm going to set this spring in here. That spring will be there, and then I'm going to push that through, and then come through here with the spring compressor. And then you're gonna make sure, I like to keep that thing in the middle there. Press it down, and then you're gonna get your keepers gooped up a little bit here so they stick. And one thing I like to try to avoid, so we're good right now. One thing I try to avoid is setting it with one keeper in there, because that is a good way to break them. These things are very flimsy and they snap all the time. And if you have only one keeper in there, it'll snap it right down the middle. And then that'll cause a lot of trouble later. So when you go up, you need to be slow. Make sure your hole lines up. And right there is number 8 exhaust installed. So I'm going to go ahead and finish all these on a time lapse. So we've already checked the install height and the spring pressure on the intakes, and we got those right at 102 with 50,000 shims. This head is completely assembled, and I'm going to go ahead and throw it up on that bench over on the other side. We've already painted one, and Brett actually threw one on. And here's what she looks like. I think that aluminum paint turned out very well. And that looks awesome, especially with those black head bolts. That turned out beautifully. So we're going to go ahead and work on the other one, get it thrown on, then we'll throw the intake on. Then we'll throw everything else on and throw it on the test stand and fire it up. This head's all masked off, and I'm gonna get ready to spray paint it. Here's the paint right here. And it's just high heat engine paint. And I'm gonna go ahead and spray this thing off, and then we'll go ahead and throw it on the motor. Brett's working on fitting all the rockers right now. And that's coming together. So those are some nice rockers. I'm going through and making sure that the roller tips line up with the valve stems, all right? And you got to use these guides right here. So you look, that's a bad angle. They line up, and you have to go through and make sure that they're all. You got to sway them back and forth and make sure that they're not going to go too far one way or the other. You're going to need to make sure that they're right in the center, and you also need to make sure that they're sitting in the center this way. which they are there as well. I can't really show you that with the camera. But you need to make sure that they're sitting in the center there when the lobe is down, because once that opens, that rocker is going to come forward a little bit on that stem. Not much, just a little bit. So you need to make sure they're in the middle. If you install them and they're sitting right there and then it comes forward, it's going to chip away that valve real quick. So I've just been going through with each of these guides, and you may notice that they're welded. So like that one right there, I cut it, and then I set this one, and I set this one, and I left them in place, and I tacked them right here and here while they're in place, and I took everything off, and then I went and welded that up there, and I welded on the back side. Same thing with that one. And these two came out good. You can even grind down in here to get them to fit. What happens is this push rod won't allow you to go to one side or the other, and it makes it clocked. So all of these on this head are completely good. We got a little bit impatient. Well, hold on a second. You may notice there's an empty test stand, and that motor, that 355 that was on there that hasn't sold yet, by the way, that's still for sale, sitting over under the plastic. But we got a little impatient and tried to put this head on, and we smudged up the paint because it wasn't fully dry yet. So I think this thing's dry now. We're gonna go ahead and set this head on there, and then I guess I'll do the same thing to the other side. Brett's working on putting this new gear in our third member for Sloppy. And we finally found a thing of gas to heat this bolt up, and both of those, so we can get them out of there. But everything's going all right. So we're gonna keep working on this and get that other head on, get everything assembled, and we'll put the intake on and the valve covers, and this motor is coming together. Got this other head on, and got all of those. I think I already talked about, I got all those plates, those guide plates corrected and in line. So I'm gonna go ahead, well, first of all, what we're gonna do is take this thing, before we get the intake on, since it's kind of a weird thing and we can't use a puller like what was on the, let's see, like what's on this 355 over here. Since we can't use that because it would throw it off being on one side, I think we're gonna go ahead and throw the motor on this way and just use bolts in the heads and a chain in order to lift the motor into the test stand over here. And then we'll go ahead and put the intake on from there, and I'll keep working on this side of the head with the rockers and the guide plates and push rods and everything like that. And hopefully this thing's gonna fire soon. We've got the motor in the test stand, and I probably haven't recorded in a while. So we've got all the rockers set on this side, completely done. And we also got this header on, and it comes out, it dumps out right here, so we'll have to obviously move that timing light. But that'll be all right. And made a bit of a mess with antifreeze trying to get this thing hooked up, but that's okay as well. So I'm working on getting these last two rockers set up. I've gone through, and like I said, I had to weld some of those guide plates. Don't judge me on those welds. They're very, very oily, and I could do much better. And I didn't clean them up either. I just kind of welded it, but got good penetration, and it's good. I use a TIG welder for that one. After I've got those all lined up, so this line right here is completely in line. So between this tip, this one, and this one, it's completely in line, so this rocker can sit perfectly right there. So that sits perfectly right there if you move it back and forth. Got the same amount of play on both sides, and that's going to be perfect. So that one sits there, and then we'll have another one on this side. We're going to go ahead and set these things to 0 lash, and then we'll do a quarter turn after that. And so I'm going to watch, and I'm going to do, I've covered this before in that 355 video. I'm going to do the intake when exhaust starts to open. So I'm going to be watching this exhaust right here, and as soon as that lifter down here, that's not in there. As soon as that lifter down there starts to open, I'm going to stop. So that started to open. I went a little bit far. If you see, it's poking up a little bit. So right there, it just popped up. So that exhaust is starting to open, so I'm going to go ahead and do intake right here. Now, you're going to grab your locks right here and screw that thing on there. Now that you've got the lock on, I'm going to be that right there. So what I'm doing with that push rod, moving it back and forth. You can see that rocker's moving. And I'm going to tighten this until all that slack is out. You'll hear it a little tiny bit, so I'm going to go a little bit more. Okay, it's gone right there. And from there, we're going to go ahead and do 1/4 turn, and all that slack is out of there, and it's not compressing that lifter too much. If you don't want to compress the lifters until they're pumped with oil, and so you make sure that they're not compressed. Shove your Allen wrench in, and this is what's going to lock it. So you get it there, and get this on there, and I need 2 hands to do this, but I'm just going to hold that to hold it, and then tighten that to lock it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back and do this one. Now that we've got that exhaust, or the intake rocker completely tightened down and lashed, we're going to go ahead and do the exhaust. And I'm running out of battery on this test stand here, so hopefully I can get this thing going. You're going to do the exhaust when intake is all the way open and starts to close. So I'm going to watch that rocker, and as soon as it comes all the way open, I'm going to stop and then kind of bump it. So it's open right now, and it's starting to close. Probably couldn't see it on camera, but now it's starting to close. And I'm going to go ahead and do this. I think we're going to go ahead and end this video here. In the next video, we're going to set that intake on, and we're going to tidy up any loose ends, and we're going to fire it for the very first time. We'll kind of go through and show you how to tune the carburetors and get those running nice and smooth. They should be pretty good as far as linkage is concerned, because Stu made the linkage for all of it. And so we're going to go ahead and fire this thing up next video. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned.